What's up, folks? Welcome back to TacticalTortoise. My name is Trevi, and this is what I'd like to make a new series where I talk about particularly interesting, thematic, or cool lists and combos and ways to play them on the table successfully in a semi-competitive environment. If you enjoy this video and you'd like more of this content, go ahead and let me know down in the comment section below. Drop a like in the video. All that's YouTube stuff. I love playing lists like these, so any excuse to do that is one that I will grab immediately. Today, I want to talk about a particularly cool style of Astra Militarum, that being Mechanized Infantry. In this list, I want to focus very heavily on vehicles and vehicle-mounted infantry and getting as much work and damage as we can out of those units rather than just using them as objective holders and as action monkeys. Astra Militarum have a lot of really effective vehicles and transports. They have an unsung hero of the index, that being the Tortoise Prime. So today we're going to be using that vehicle to combo with some other characters, units, and effects to give our Astra Militarum army an absolutely ludicrous damage output. This build is relatively flexible and you can focus more heavily on these really powerful infantry units, or you can only take a couple of these combinations in your army if you want to focus more on other Militarum units like artillery and tanks. So the core of the combination is a Tempestus command squad equipped with a Tempester with a command rod. The command squad then gives you access to several special weapons, in this case a grenade launcher, melty gun, and plasma gun. We then attach that unit into a unit of 5 Tempestus Scions. The Tempestus Scions themselves have a couple more hotshot las guns, but importantly also get another plasma gun and a melta gun. The benefits here is that the Tempester Prime gives you ranged weapons sustained hits 1, so every 6 that they roll to hit is gonna be an additional hit. The Tempestus Scions themselves, when they attack enemies that are in range of an objective, which is most of the time what they're gonna be shooting at, get rerolls to hit, meaning that we can take any of our hit rolls that are not a 6, reroll them, and try to get additional 6s for even more hits. Now we're gonna take that unit of 10 models between the 5-man command squad and the 5-man Tempestus Scion squad, and we're going to embark them into that vehicle, the Tortoise Prime. Now, the reason that we're taking Tortoise Primes in this case, not one of the other really powerful transports that Militarum have access to, is its fire support ability. Fire support lets it choose a unit after it has fired its guns, and it actually has pretty reasonable shooting. In my build, I took an autocannon as well as a missile launcher, but it can also take a pintle weapon like a Stormbolter, and it actually has a wide variety of options it can take, either taking assault cannons or hotshot volley guns, so it actually can tech to be very strong into multiple profiles. Having a lot of guns is really good for the Tortoise Prime, since it can fire its big weapons at an armored target, but if you want to use its fire support ability on something else, you can actually fire its smaller weapons, its Stormbolter, into that other thing and choose to use fire support on that to grant its wound rerolls to the unit that is disembarking. Now, most of the infantry weapons in Astra Militarum are relatively low strength, so they don't really wound that often, but getting full rerolls from our friend over here, the Tortoise Prime, means that they actually do kind of a lot of damage. Wounding on 5s with a high volume of shots and all of the buffs that we just talked about is pretty strong. The other thing that makes this combination work is the new change to the Astra Militarum orders. Orders are special abilities that officer units like the Tempester Prime in the Scion unit can use to buff units around them. They normally have a range of 6 inches unless you have a special piece of equipment, but in this case we're mostly going to be using the Tempestus Scions to buff themselves. Now, the new change to orders, which occurred last month in the January 2024 data slate, made it so that officers give their orders at the end of a phase in which they disembark a transport, meaning that we can fill these transports up with lots of units, disembark all of them, and then issue all of their orders immediately at the end of the movement phase. This means that the Tempester Prime with the command rod can jump out of a transport and give themselves take aim to give them +1 to hit. We also have 2 plasma guns as well as all of the hotshot weapons in the unit, so we also want to be benefited from first rank fire, second rank fire. So if we can add another unit into that transport, we can then issue more than one order when we disembark, and the command rod allows the unit to benefit from multiple orders at the same time. So on top of these 2 units, we can also source some other officers who can order any friendly units around them. The 2 that I took in my list were Iron Hand Strachan and Ursa Creed. Now, the benefit of these is that they can start the game inside the transports. You can disembark the Tempestus Scion squad with the embarked Tempester, order themselves with the Tempester, then disembark a second character from the transport by themselves, and then issue their orders. Both Iron Hand Strachan and Ursa Creed can order 2 friendly infantry units, so you can order 2 potential Tempestus Scion command squads at the same time from the transports that they disembarked from. That gives us access to both take aim and first rank fire, second rank fire to buff our plasma guns. On top of that, Ursa Creed also gives us access to a free stratagem, which we can use from one of the regiment units to apply overlapping fields of fire to an enemy unit and give us +1 AP. I'm not going to assume that we have have that active, but that is one of the big benefits of Ursa Creed. +1 AP across any regiment or squadron unit firing at the target of the stratagem is a massive improvement in damage, especially because a lot of these weapons are kind of mid AP, and being pushed to AP 3, 4, or even in some cases 5 is a huge deal. Ironhand Strachan, the other character that we have, is actually kind of nuts himself, by the way. He has 1,000,000 attacks in melee, he's anti-monster, and gets full hit and wound rerolls when he charges. He's only 55 points, which is kind of nuts, and not only does he give 2 orders to regiment units, which includes the Tempestus Scions, but he also just hits like an absolute Mack truck. Now, to round out the combo, we can also add a second character into the Tempestus Scion squad, since most of the Militarum infantry, including Tempestus Scions, can have 2 characters attached to them, as long as no more than one of them is a command squad. That means we can add a Primaris Psyker to the unit. The Primaris Psyker does give the unit a potential invulnerable save in the opponent's shooting phase, which can make them a little bit harder to kill, since they are going to be bailing out of transports directly into the teeth of the fight, but they also have a ridiculously damaging ranged attack by themselves. Their Smite fires D6 + 3 blast attacks, and when overcharged, gains devastating wound. Because the Primaris Psyker is also attached into the same unit as the Tempester Prime, he also gets sustained hits 1 and the benefit of any orders that are applied to the unit. This means that pretty solid profile is going to be hitting on 2s, getting rerolls to hit against enemies on objectives from the Tempestus Scion's base ability, and also gaining reroll to wounds from the fire support. Those reroll to wounds allow you to convert more wound rolls into 6s, which then convert into devastating damage, which is unsavable and absolutely lethal on these guys. So when the entire combo is assembled, we have the 11 model unit, the 5 Tempestus Scions, 5 model command squad, and Primaris Psyker embarked into a Torox Prime. They're going to move up the Torox Prime into close range of an enemy unit that you absolutely want to disappear. Apply your orders, getting 1st rank fire, 2nd rank fire from one of your officers, and probably from the Tempester Prime, getting take aim on the unit as well. That means the entire unit's going to be hitting on 2s. If the enemy is near an objective, you're also going to get full hit rerolls. You can then use your full hit rerolls to try to fish for additional sustained hits, and then when you go to your wound reroll, as long as you have fired the Torox Prime at the target unit first, you're going to apply fire support and reroll all of the wounds from that entire unit. All told, that is a crack grenade from the grenade launcher, 2 melta gun shots, and 6 plasma gun shots, alongside a plasma pistol from the Tempester in the Scion squad, and 3 hotshot las guns, each firing 3 shots apiece. Now, diving into some math hammer here, assuming that we have a clean line of sight to a toughness 9 enemy vehicle, and we have all of these buffs applied, meaning that we are rerolling our hit rolls, wound rolls, getting additional shots with our rapid fire weapons, +1 to hit, and sustained hits, we average against, again, a toughness 9 3+ save vehicle about 25 damage. That's so many. If they're in cover and going to a 2+ save, we are averaging a little bit less, about 20 damage. Is this real? Is this real life? If we're going into something particularly high toughness, so a toughness 12 enemy, we're only averaging around 16 damage. Is that math actually correct? That's so nuts, but I think it's correct, yeah. That's also not including the damage output from the Torox Prime itself. We can also be sourcing +1 EP from Fields of Fire, either from Ursa Creed or just spending the CP naturally. And I'm also not accounting for devastating wounds on the Primaris Psyker. So this combination does an absolute immense amount of damage. Now, the other benefit that we have of having Tempester Primes in the list is that we can also grant the Tempestus Scion unit's battle line, which allows us to take more of these units than we would normally be able to. Although the Tempestus Command Squad and the Primaris Psykers are both subject to Rule of 3, so that specific combo can only be used 3 times, but the Torox Prime, being a dedicated transport, as well as the Tempestus Scions then gaining battle line if the Prime is our Warlord, means we can take more units of them. The other benefit that we get for the Tempestus Scion units gaining battle line is that you can attach agents of the Imperium characters to them. So we could put Lord Inquisitor Kyria Draxus in the unit as well. She also has a ton of attacks herself. She herself has a sustained hit 2 indirect fire weapon and a devastating wound 2 damage weapon herself, which puts her damage output somewhere in the realm of a Primaris Psyker. Obviously not as many devastating wound shots, but more just regular AP 0 shots. So you can attach her with a unit of 10, which will then have 2 melta guns and 2 plasma guns in it, and use basically the same combination on them. That unit has a little bit less damage, but the damage value of the Kyria Draxa squad is roughly equivalent to a 4th copy of this Tempestus Scion combo. So assembling all that together into a list with some support units as well. As I said before, you can take more or less of these Torox Prime combos if you want to. Each one of them costs you about, I think at the current Munitorum Field Manual, it's 285 if I am doing my math right. So they are relatively expensive. It is a lot of your army to do that, but again, they do 25 damage to like armored targets, which is quite a few. So my list ended up being the 2 officers that we spoke about earlier, Ironhand Strachan and Ursula Creed, a unit of Gaunt's Ghosts to use their uppy downy to score points, 3 Militarum command squads with 3 Primaris Psychers, those attaching into 3 units of 5 Tempestus Scions with another unit of 10 Tempestus Scions, then the 4 Torox Primes to support them, and a Calidus Assassin to help score secondaries. We then also took 2 Tank Commanders to add some longer range, heavily armored shooting, as well as a unit of 10 Kadishan Jungle Fighters and a unit of 10 Kazarkin, just to take the midboard of the table and not force us to dedicate our Torox Primes to take objectives away from our opponent. Now obviously this isn't the most effective Astra Militarum list ever constructed, but it is super cool, and if you want to play a mechanized infantry style of list where you are bailing your dudes out of APCs, rushing them onto enemy objectives, and absolutely obliterating them with close range shooting, which is one of my favorite archetypes in any miniature game to play, then this list is right up your alley. And again, this is a combination that you can include in other Militarum lists. There are some downsides to taking a list like this, obviously. Your transports have 2 to 3 characters in them most of the time. So given the fact that you're running like 14 characters in this list, means that your opponent's secondary options are really easy. They can take fixed secondaries and Windmill Slam Assassination on the table, and they will probably max that one out. In addition, you do have a lot of transports as well. The Torax Primes and the Tank Commanders all give up 3 points on Bring It Down. While they can't max their Bring It Down because they're only going to be able to score a total of 18 points, they can get a potential 38 out of 40 points just by killing your army. And the Torax Primes, while there are a lot of them and they're not immediately easy to kill, they will die if a heavy anti-tank looks at them. They're not super high toughness value. So there are some downsides to playing an archetype like this. Your opponent gets to score a lot of points against you, but on the flip side, they can't really go into the middle of the table, because if they walk into the line of fire of those Torox Primes, almost anything in the game is going to die to them, which they should, because those Torox Prime combos are very expensive. One thing that you want to do when playing this list is ensure that you can get as many of these combos to hit your opponent without throwing your guys out into line of sight. This is very effective against very aggressive enemies, where you can try to hide your Scion units or your Torax Primes or even your Tank Commanders, where they can get angles on the opponent but not necessarily reveal themselves to other shooting. If you can do that and you can get multiple turns of going back into the transport and then bailing out again in a future turn, that is where this list really shines. But that's difficult to do, and good players will often spread their army out such that it's difficult to hide from all of it. Editing Trevi here, just mentioning as well the use of strategic reserves and potential rapid ingresses with these transport combos. With the new update that allows units to disembark from transports in the turn that they arrive from reserve, it actually allows you to use these things pretty flexibly when coming off the table edge, and with a relatively decent range, 6 inches off a table edge plus a disembarkation plus the weapons range means that they can shoot most of the board from the side of the table, and that allows them to play a little bit more aggressively and punish enemies for moving out in the open without having to actually maneuver your guys around terrain, which definitely helps those big chunky Torox Primes. Because you need to be disembarking when you shoot your guns into an armored target in order to get the benefit of fire support, you need to then survive, embark the next turn, and then be able to move on and disembark again in the turn. So there's a lot of failure points. Most of the time it's going to act as a bit of an alpha strike. Fortunately, none of it's really reliant on stratagems, besides maybe fields of fire. So if your opponent just deploys out in the open, you could potentially rocket all of the Torox Primes forward and be firing with all of your Tempestus Scions on the first turn of the game, or maybe second, which can really punish a very aggressive enemy. The Tempestus Scions also only get their rerolls against a single target that the Torox Prime shoots at, so if your opponent has a lot of little units, it's a little bit less effective, but you do have the other guns in the army to clear out any units that the Tempestus Scions haven't killed with their Alpha Strike. Killing 4 enemy units at a time is usually just fine. So with that, that's all I have to say about this list. Let me know down in the comment section what you think about it, if you would play something like this on the table, and if you enjoy the style of a little bit more thematic and mechanically interesting armies. And if you do, I'll continue to build weird lists like this and talk about them on the channel. You have anything to say, Inky? Oh, you do? Okay. Wow, that was very impressive. So as always, thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. Remember to keep it classy, folks, and have happy wargaming.